All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Um, I would like to introduce your trainer today. We have Teresa, and I always am not quite sure I'm saying your last name correctly.
Yeah,
Is
that's
it
right. Rotschafer. You just don't pronounce the T.
Rotschafer? Okay.
Yes.
I think I was saying it wrong. I'm glad I asked.
No problems.
And you would think I would know by now since we've already had several trainings, but
That's all right.
at any rate, yes, Teresa is the Assistant City Administrator and Finance Director for the City of Johnston, Iowa. And we are very fortunate as the Iowa League of Cities has contracted with her um, back in November. They contracted with Teresa to be the municipal consultant for the Iowa League of Cities. So with that, I'm going to let Teresa go ahead and start. And I will, while you're doing that, Teresa, I will share my screen with you.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everybody. I know we kind of have a small crowd with us today, so typically I would probably ask that we hold our questions to the end, but they're small enough groups. You can unmute yourself, ask questions if you'd like throughout uh, the training that we're going to do today. But as mentioned, I'm Teresa Rotschafer, and I'm the Assistant City Administrator Finance Director for, I guess, about 3 more weeks. 3 more weeks, I think. I'm retiring March 15th, and then my consulting will be the next chapter of my life. I started consulting with the league in November while still continuing to do my job here in Johnston, quite frankly, because I had a lot of vacation time or PTO time. And honestly, I didn't think I would be quite as busy as I have been, um, helping cities and helping COGs. I guess I call you guys a COG. I don't know if you call yourself a COG. Do you
We
call
are a
yourself
cog,
a
yes.
COG or yeah?
We call ourselves a
Um,
cog.
you call yourself a COG because down here in Des Moines, when I got here, I kept thinking, who is our COG? What is our COG? It's just different because I came from Midas when I was in Webster City. So I've been in local government 43, a little over 43 years, and I've worked for just two cities in those 43 years, but I've always been part of the finance part of the city. And so I'm kind of a geek when it comes to local government finance, which sets me aside from most people in the world. But hopefully, when I talk about things today, I'll make you a little bit excited about the finance world. Um, the things we're going to talk about today. I was trying to look. I don't know that I could really tell by the attendance sheet necessarily what roles people played in their positions at their jobs, but um, do we have elected people with us? Do we have appointed people with us? Do we have staff people with us? I don't know if we have a mix. Do you know if we have a mix of staff or
I'm not positive. Why don't we
certain
just go
either?
around and have everybody introduce themselves? Maybe we do that
That'd be
since it
great.
is a small
I'd love
group.
to do that.
Okay. Let's start with Angie. Angie can't hear me. Megan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Unmute yourselves and introduce yourselves.
Yeah, you're all muted and unvideoed.
I am the appointed city clerk for the city of Wheatland. I took over for my mother-in-law, Lori, who had been doing this for 20 plus years. So it's kind of nice that my mentor is actually my mother-in-law, so I can ask her questions if need be.
Mm-hmm. Right. Great.
That's awesome. Leon?
Oh, yeah. Hi, my name's Leon. I'm with Intercog, Iowa Northland Regional Council of Governments, and I'm a community planner. And just thought I'd get this information. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi, Angie. Do you want to introduce yourself? She said hi. Maybe she's having trouble with her audio.
Maybe. That's fine.
If you want to just put your title in the chat, Angie, that'd be fine. Lindsay, are you able?
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I am the city clerk for the city of Durango. It's just a part-time position since the city is so small and they were without a clerk for a little over a year. So I kind of currently have my hands full.
I imagine you do.
Right. Um, I had a chat. Where did it go? Let's see here. Can't I see the chat? Angie put in the chat, but now I can't see it. I don't know why I can't see it.
She's in two cities, I think it said. So
Yeah.
anyway, I
I don't know.
think
Can you
it
see the
sounds,
chat? I can't see it.
yeah, she's from
New Vienna?
New Vienna and Luxembourg.
Luxembourg. Okay. Thank you, Angie. Sorry, I don't know why I can't see the chat, but at any rate, no, thank
So
you.
it does sound like most people are staff at this point. And
We
I
have
know
another one
this is
joining.
a very stressful and uh, time sensitive uh, time in city government. And so we're going to talk about some of that stuff right now. So I'm going to try to share my presentation. Did you shared my,
Oh, you should be able to share your screen. It says that you would have the
okay.
ability to share your screen.
So, yeah. Okay. So, um, what we're going to talk about today and our agenda for today, if I can get my pictures out of the way and I can advance slides and such. Um, what we're going to talk about today had a lot to do with helping your elected and appointed officials understand what their responsibilities in financial management was for local government. And I'm sorry they're not here today. However, many of you are appointed. So I need to make sure that you understand what your role is regarding financial management for your community. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the tools that you have available to you and the financial condition of your community. And we're going to talk about some of the laws that are out there right now and the reporting of the financial activity and the purpose of trying to safeguard your community's assets. And then really going to talk a little bit about the budgeting process and how to make it a valuable tool to help your community achieve your goals. Um, One of the major differences that is sometimes difficult for elected officials to understand the difference between business and government is that um, is the actual motive for why we exist. And so businesses exist to make a profit, and we exist to provide a service. And there are different things that drive those motives, and that um, for the profit motive people, of course, they're wanting a return on their investment. And we're again focusing on the motive of the service motive and what it's going to cost to provide that service. And it's appropriate for us to come up with a plan, a budget, a financial plan to provide those services for our communities. So, um, how do we know how your city is doing financially? And now, if I'm sharing my screen, does my picture cover up the slide like that? Or do you see just the slide and not my picture part?
I see the whole slide.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. So, first thing you need to do, of course, is when you take on a new position or when your electeds are elected to the city, is they really should sit down and look and see how the city is doing financially to begin with, and make sure they look at the reports that are out there and that they get those reports and that they're able to ask some questions. For you as clerks, that are out there. Of course, you're appointed to as the city clerk, or you may be a new city clerk. You too are going to want to know how the city is that you're coming in to become at. How are they doing financially? What kind of shape is the city in that you're now going to become responsible for in managing those books and creating those reports? So um, there are many monthly reports that you as city clerk should be providing to your councils. Of course, we have the annual financial report, and then of course there's the adopted budget report. But what I'm finding is going to cities all around Iowa and helping them with their budgets this year. We're having a major turnover with city clerks, and I don't know if that's always the case, and I just had never been involved, but it sure is the case right now. And in a lot of cities, city clerks and city councils aren't seeing the financial reports, and city clerks aren't giving them the financial reports. And there could be a whole bunch of reasons why those reports aren't getting done. But that's part of why I'm here now, of course, is to help figure out how a city can do those reports and start getting things done to report to the council. But at a minimum, the city councils should see the monthly bank reconciliation so that they know the city clerk is balancing with the bank each month. They should see a report that's called a treasurer's report that shows what the balance is for each fund at the end of every month. And then they should always see a budget to actual report, so they know what their budget was, where they're at right now, how much budget is left. And then if there are questions, of course, they could ask questions along the way. There's other reports that you could be giving them. I always give a treasurer's investment report, in addition to a treasurer's year-to-date report. I mean, you could inundate them with reports, but at a minimum, they should be seeing a bank reconciliation, a budget to actual report, and a year-to-date treasurer's report. So I have more examples or more wording about what those should be, but I won't really necessarily get into those right now. As we go through the presentation, if we have questions, then we can. Whoops, I went the wrong direction. I hit the wrong button, that's what I did. So since most of you are city people, city planner, you might understand this, but of course our money or the way we account for things in the city are much different. I didn't ask the clerk that is in Durango, I believe she said. She has her hands full. You know, I didn't know if she'd been in city government before or not, but if you come from the private world and you come to local government, the way we do our accounting is much different. Of course, we account by fund and by program. And the reason the state set that up that way is that they believe fund accounting restricts how and where our money can be budgeted and spent. They think it's more restrictive and more transparent on how we can spend it versus how businesses spend their money. They don't have to account for it in what we call a bucket, which I'll show you here in a minute. And that, you know, we can move money between our buckets, but of course that needs to be permitted and needs to be done so by a formal resolution transfer that's authorized by the council. Now, the past few years, time's fly, but 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years now, when you adopt your budget, you should also be adopting a resolution that approves the transfers that are going to take place during that budget year. There were a number of cities that were doing transfers throughout the year that the council had no idea they were being made. And the Department of Management thought that was a bad practice. So they changed the rules and determined that we should now have formal action by the council so that the elected authorities know that we as city clerks and finance directors are moving money between buckets. We can do it. We just need to make sure that someone knows we're doing it. these are our buckets, and I think since most of the people that were on here would understand this, um, all these buckets or all these funds have different meanings, and the money that can go in each bucket, of course, needs something different. And we're going to talk about um, each of these buckets as I move forward, but I guess think about it as like a dozen separate small businesses that we have out there all under one umbrella. And so that's kind of how we think about the city government. We got a lot of things going on, but it's going to be budgeted and spent under one great big umbrella, but we've got to track it separately. So that's how we do it in these funds. Like I just had, the biggest bucket, of course, is the general fund, and that's going to be your chief operating fund of the city. And most activities and most of the things that the general public thinks about when they talk about city operations are the operations that we have that come out of the general fund, such as police, fire, our library, parks, cemetery. You know, those are the services that we're providing that they want someone to pay for. And so that's the general fund, and that's pretty much what our property tax pays for. But the largest source of revenue that comes into that general fund is property taxes, but it does include other revenues that might come in, such as building permit revenues or liquor license revenues, pet licenses, uh, pool concessions, those revenues, those types of things come into the general fund as well. Then the next bucket we talk about, and when I talk about buckets, and those of you who have already put your budgets together or are working on your budgets, you know that on the state budget form, the buckets I'm talking about are the buckets that are the columns. I say the columns are the buckets, so to speak. So the next column is what's called special revenues, and that means exactly what it says. The revenues that are coming into that area are from a specific source. So it's not just general, it's coming in for a main reason, and it's going to be spent for a specific reason. And the main one most people think of course, is road use tax. We get our road use tax revenue from the Department of Transportation. And by law, there's only certain things we can spend road use tax money on. Some other ones, I could take out the emergency levy now because we're not going to get emergency levy revenue anymore because of the new law. But if we had local option sales tax, that's a special revenue. If we have our employee benefit levy, like we go ahead and levy for other employee benefits, or like IPERS or 411, if you're a 411 city, those are all special revenue funds that would come into the special revenue fund. It can only be spent for that special purpose, right? And then another special revenue, of course, is TIF, or tax increment financing. And if you're a smaller city and you don't have any urban renewal areas and you don't collect TIF, which tax increment is the property tax revenue that you would collect on an improved district, then you aren't going to have anything. And they have a special column called special revenue TIF. They separated that out a few years ago when the legislature started asking cities for more specific information just about TIF. So depending upon your community, you might or might not have something in that column. And then three of the other buckets. So there's a bucket or a column that's called debt service fund. The only thing that should be in the debt service fund is the amount of principal, interest, and your registrar fee that you're going to pay for the 1 year that's in the budget for that coming year. And if you're issuing a bond and you have bond revenue proceeds coming in, those bond revenue proceeds really should go into a project fund, not into a debt service fund. So remember that if you're issuing a debt, and have your FA or your financial advisor help you on where you're going to put those sources of revenues as they come in, because the only thing that gets paid for out of the debt service fund is the principal and interest on your long-term debt. Now, the revenue that goes into your debt service fund could be property tax money, or it could be money that you've transferred, say from the sewer fund or the water fund. If you issued debt that fixed a street that included water and sewer main, you might have done one, we call them a GO debt, which is a general obligation debt, that was going to be rebated by debt service or property taxes and water and sewer. And so on your budget, you're going to be transferring money from the water operating fund to the debt service fund so that you can pay that debt with water revenues, but it still all gets paid out of the debt service. So if you need help with that, you can just call me. But anyway, and then of course, capital project funds are basically the resources and the expenditures for anything that you consider a capital project for your city. And typically cities have set their own rules on what determines a project is a capital project. Say it's a project you're going to do that the project is going to have a life of 15 to 20 years or more, and it's going to be at a cost of 50,000 or more, or 100,000 or more, something like that, that would define it for your community as a capital project. Then you would set up something separately in the capital projects fund. There's another column that's called a permanent fund. And if you have anything in the permanent fund, it's more than likely money that's held in a trust. And the one I can think of most legitimately is called a perpetual care fund. And so you have a city cemetery and you've sold cemetery lots. And over the years, when people buy a cemetery lot, they have to pay the city so much money for the care and maintenance of those lots out into forever, perpetuity. And so your money, when they give you that money for the perpetual care fund, it would go into this permanent fund, and the only money you can spend out of a permanent fund is the interest you earn. You can never spend the principal of money that is in a permanent fund. So someone gave the city an endowment and said, here's $2 million, and over the years you're allowed to spend the interest on our library or something like that. You would set that up as a permanent fund. And then the last fund or category, of course, is proprietary, which those are self-supported operations or utilities. And so what I mean by that is your water, sewer, if you have a gas utility or electric utility that your city runs, basically these are what I consider utilities that the city has set the rates themselves. They run the utility, they collect the revenue for the utility, they spend all the money to operate the utility, and their rates are set high enough that these utilities are self-supported. You should not have to spend any property tax money to help support proprietary or enterprise fund activity of a city. Now, regarding the garbage fund, it depends on your community. If your community is actually the garbage company, you pick up the garbage and you have the staff that's the garbage and the trucks and all that type of thing, that's a proprietary enterprise fund. And this is where you would account for it. If you're a city that contracts with someone and they drive around the town and they pick up the garbage and all you do is include on your utility bill the garbage fee and the recycling fee, and every month your city writes a check to that company, you're not the business, they're the business, and that should be reported in your general fund. So I found this in a lot of cities has been reported differently than that. That's the best practice way of reporting regarding garbage funds. Then, of course, each fund that we were just talking about, obviously they get broken down into revenues, expenditures, and transfers. And then, of course, we break them down even further and further into a whole bunch of details. But darn it. I hit the wrong key on my tablet. I keep going back. Sorry, folks. So for revenues, these are your typical revenues that you would collect as a city, but this is how it's reported on the state form. So you need to, these will be as reported on your public hearing document. It has totals for each one of these items right here, and they're broken down even further, like we just said. But you'll be totaling property taxes, TIF, other city taxes. Other city taxes would be hotel, motel, local option sales tax, any franchise fee money that you're collecting. Licenses and permits is one total that I have you report. Use of money and property, that is rent you might be collecting or interest money you might be collecting on properties. Intergovernmental would be the revenues you've received from either the federal government, the state government, your local government, such as the schools or the county or other cities if you're doing a joint project. And then charges for fees and services are going to be the water fees, the sewer fees, electric fees if you have them, um, the garbage fees, whether they're reported in general or proprietary, that would still be a fee. And then other fees or charges if you charge fees for like copies of accident reports or things like that. Those are all going to be in your charges for fees and services column. And then you report that total. Special assessments, if you happen to assess for capital improvements in your community, you would be reporting the revenue that you're receiving or you anticipate to receive for those special revenue projects. And miscellaneous is just what it says. If it hasn't fallen in one of these other little areas, it's going to be miscellaneous. And then other financing sources, when it talks about revenue, that's going to be talking about your transfer in. So monies that are being transferred in as revenues, and also any sale of capital assets or property, or potentially any receipt of long-term debt money that you might receive for the city. So all of those are the revenues that make up the total on your public hearing document for revenues. These are the summary totals you have to get to when you fill out your public hearing report. And then for expenditures, you have to come up with summaries by function. We call them by function, and there's 9 of them. And they are areas of services provided to your community that are of like mind, like you would think they would go together. So like public safety, you have your police, your fire, your ambulance, your animal control, your building inspection, those types of things that consider to be safety for the public. Public works would be things like your roads, streets, and bridges, your street lights, your traffic control, your snow plowing, those types of things. Health and social services would be things like welfare assistance programs that you might support, mosquito spraying, things like that. Culture and recreation are things like your library, your parks, your community center, if you have a museum, things like that. Community and economic development, again, just like it sounds, that'd be your planning and zoning, that'd be your community development, that would be where your TIF economic development stuff is happening in that area. And then general government is kind of all the rest of us. So a city clerk, us finance directors, the city manager, the city council, mayor and the city council. If we have an election, that falls under general government. If we have a city attorney, that falls under general government. I found in a lot of cities, they don't necessarily have a separate department for like all of their insurance, whereas here in Johnston, we do have a special department that's for our tort liability insurance. so that all our insurance is paid for out of one department. That's under general government. Debt service is just what we just talked about, all the debt we may have for our city capital projects. Again, depends on your policy in your community and enterprise. Again, we just talked about those in detail and what they are. Here's the rule you all must follow, and here's the rule that gets broken and gets written up in many special audits, many city exams, that we should never spend more than the amount in any program before amending the budget. So these are our program areas right here that I just talked about. And so when I say that, let's say public safety has $2 million in it, and that $2 million is made up of $1.5 million for police, 300,000 for fire, 200,000 for ambulance, something like that. And ambulance spends 300,000, but fire only spends 200,000, and the fire or the police are right at theirs. So we're going to be still at our total for the entire program area of public safety. So we're not going to be in trouble, right? Because we didn't go over for the program area. Some people think they're in trouble if they go over for the actual department within the program. You're only in trouble if you go over the total for the program. And I think what's so important for people to understand and to understand about the budget process and the Iowa historians or whoever set up how our whole budget system would go is part of the reason that the state has done what they have done until last year was the fact that all of us are spending public money, right? And so the hope is that you never spend public money without the public knowing you're going to do it. So if you don't amend the budget before you go over, you basically have spent public funds without the public knowing you were going to do so and without their approval. So that's why we get our hands slapped. So one of the things I've had to stress year after year after year is that there is an absolute difference between cash in the bank and budget. And it may say that we have $4 million in the bank, but our budget may be only $3 million. So you can't have someone say, we've got 100,000 we can spend. Let's just do it. So you do it, then you're over budget. And you're right, you had the cash, but you didn't have the budget. So you can't spend it unless you have the budget. And so some department heads have either don't listen or just don't want to listen about that. And some councils have a tough time struggling with that. Well, we got the money. I don't know why we have to do this. But, you kind of have to stand firm and tell them we have to make sure that we have budget before we spend it. So you're right, you have the money, but we don't have the budget. So if you want to spend that money, we need to have a budget amendment. Is that what you're telling me you want to do? That's what we have to say to our elected officials when they keep harping at us about, well, we can just spend the money, we have it. And sometimes I know it's very hard and I'm old and calloused and have said it many times. And some of you younger, newer clerks might find it difficult to say that to them. But I'm here to help you say it if you need me to. So if need be, that's what we would do. But here's one of the biggest rules, and one of the things I'm struggling with a lot as I go to a number of communities is that, the transfers in and the transfers out have their own line on the budget and where it's supposed to go. And obviously transfers in has to equal transfers out. And most transfers are between funds. That's how you make your transfers. So you might ask, why do we need to move money around if it's all our money anyway? in our checking account. The issue would be because you're not, if you're spending money out of the water fund to help pay for something that should have really been paid for by property taxes and in the general fund, you do need to move the money so that not only the public knows that, but so that the council knows you didn't levy enough taxes to pay for what you said we wanted to do. And if they continue to do that year after year after year, not only will they run the water fund out of money, they'll run the general fund out of money. So it's just very important for transparency purposes and for them to understand really what they're spending in each particular fund as you go forward year after year. So I I keep forgetting to take the word out, but your revenues should not exceed your expenditures. That's not exactly what I meant to say, but your expenditures shouldn't exceed your revenues, probably more than likely. And if they do, either your revenues need to increase, like by utility rates or such and such, or you need to decrease expenses. So I need to change that word. I apologize for this, for that. But here's an example of a community. And now this is where I was talking about our buckets are our columns. So if you look across the very top of that spreadsheet, you'll see general special revenue, TIF special revenue, debt service, capital projects, permanent, proprietary, and then a total. And then if you look over here under in the column, my mouse will take me, but if you looked over here, like on line 1 over here, and you look down where it says revenue and other financing sources, you'll see those are all those revenue sources I just read to you that you have to find a total. This actual page out of a budget is in your budget. It's called the adopted budget summary. So once you've put in your detailed budget on the expenditure tabs and the revenue tabs, you'll get this adopted budget summary. And this is what you could go through with your council. And then if they wanted to see more detail, you would have those expenditure details. But you'll see where the totals are here on the left for the revenues. And then you'll see where the expenditures are by program area. And when you get to the bottom of the page, you'll see what our transfers were. And you'll see if we exceeded or were under our expenditures and what our beginning and ending balances were. That's what you need to talk about as you work through your budget on this budget summary page. So again, not very many elected officials on here, if any, I don't think, but they have a responsibility, and you can share this slide presentation with them if you'd like, but they should be overseeing and improving all your financials. They absolutely should participate in the budget process. They shouldn't just leave it up to you. They should be the ones telling you how to prioritize funding, and they need to understand that if they want to deviate from their plan or the budget they set, it's going to require some adaptation because you don't get to collect any more property taxes than you certify. So if they want to spend more, what are we not going to spend our money on? So we need to understand that. And when we talk about who's responsible for the budget, obviously the city council are responsible, but so are you guys as clerks and finance officers, as well as department directors. You need to understand what your limits are. You need to have efficient use of those resources. You need to be able to project out what are we really going to spend. If you think about it, now we're in Monday, February 26th of 2024, and you need to be planning on what you're going to be spending. So 14 months from now, what's the gas price going to be? Things like that you need to figure out. How are you going to forecast that very well? And how are you going to forecast the revenues? What's our sales tax going to be? Is everybody going to quit buying online and not do, I don't know what the forecast will be for our revenues as we move forward. And then have we created a plan for some capital improvements? Do we know what kind of projects we're going to have in the next year or 2 years? And then remind yourself and remind your council that it's their responsibility to maintain some healthy reserves. I recommend that you always keep a minimum of 25% reserve in your general fund, and that's 25% of the expenditures you're going to spend. And the reason I say that is because you don't get any property tax monies until about the fourth month of the fiscal year. So July, August, September, you guys are operating on your savings account from the year before. And if you don't have a quarter's worth of that revenue sitting there, sometimes you get in trouble and you don't have the money to do the things you need to do in those first few months. And you wouldn't want to be in that plan and get yourself in trouble. So when we talk about the budget and I talk about it being a plan, you know, the revenues are going to be based on some projections and, you know, we are guessing, we know we're guessing. But you can look back and see what was my actual experience? What have I really done over the last 3 to 5 years? And then realize that throughout the fiscal year, maybe you really do need to make some adjustments. You know, last year when all of a sudden interest rates really started going up, I was like, hoo, I got more revenue coming in than I thought I was going to have. As a note to yourself, by the way, you don't need to amend the budget when it comes to revenues. You only need to amend the budget when it comes to expenses, which I think is a little weird, but I'm just passing that on. I typically do amend revenues at the same time I amend expenditures because I want to explain to them that I've had more revenue coming in, which is why I can spend more money than we had planned on spending. But you know, obviously things happen during a fiscal year that are going to force you to make adjustments to the budget that you already had. And you know, it could have been something that happened at the legislature, you know, although we didn't have it done last year, we were already all the way through the budget and they changed the rollback idea. So we all had to go back to the beginning and start over. Um, or you could have a great big rainstorm and stormwater sewer blows out the whole backyard of a whole bunch of houses, which is what happened to me. And we needed $1 million in a hurry to fix the storm sewer and save some backyards. So, I mean, things just happen. For the most part, your budget should be the plan that you have for the year going forward, that this is these are the projects we plan on doing. This is the revenue we plan on receiving. This is the money we think we're going to spend for the year. And then included in that plan would be some policies. So the budget also sets some policy. We just talked about capital projects. Did the policy that was set say it's going to be a $50,000 project and it has to be 20-year life? Or what did they decide? And then it helped identify some priorities and told you where to get the money. Hopefully, when they talked about the capital improvements or they talked about other things, we had a big debate here on whether we were going to spend more property tax money on firefighters or police officers. What's their priority going to be? And where am I going to apply the resources from? Are we going to use more lost money? Are we going to raise the property tax money somewhere else? How are we going to do that? And then in the end, of course, your budget becomes kind of I wanted to say hysterical document, but it's really a historical document. And you keep those budgets, and I have cabinets full of budgets behind me. So I suppose when I retire, I don't know if the new finance director will say, I do not need these. But in addition to having them electronically on our server, I actually have my hardcover notebooks where I have notes that I've put in there that as we went through budget work sessions, I know why we did this project versus not that project. And then so next year when we sit down to work on the budget and the police chief says, I want this again, I want to try for this again this year, and you have a new city administrator, if he or she says, well, why didn't you get it last year? You have the notes as to what happened and why you didn't get it or something like that. So that's just why I say it's some sort of plan. And then of course it's a communication tool. It's there for your public. You need to have it out for them 10 days before your public hearing. You need to have the whole budget out there as a tool that they can see and read. You need to have it available at your library and your mayor's office and your clerk's office. And it should be able to be a document that the public can read and can understand where you guys are trying to go. It should be helpful. It should be identifying the priorities to the citizens so they know what's happening. and of course, provide the transparency that we're all looking for and the reason we're doing this in the first place, um, to the public on where your public funds are going. I know this is, some people wouldn't say this, but quite frankly, I almost consider like the budget my Bible for the year, because anytime somebody talks to me about something going on, I'll pull out my budget and I'll say, where is it in the budget? Did we have it planned? Okay, well, no. Usually that's your answer, you guys, and you all know that. No, we didn't plan on it. Okay, what are you going to give up? Those are the questions you have to ask. And the other question you have to be ready to ask at all times is, what's the public purpose for that? Because that's the other thing that the state auditor loves to find when doing exams or audits, is that the city is spending money on things that have no public purpose. So make sure you've identified what the public purpose is. If you think it's questionable, then you need to have a resolution that outlines the public purpose the way the mayor and the council sees it. And you need to just pass that resolution. And then you know what? It's not your issue as a city clerk. The council passed a resolution. They decided it was a public purpose, and you're just doing your job. It's that simple, you guys. So make sure you're kind of taking care of yourself that way. All right. And so um then the last thing that is the other reason it's my Bible is that my budget basically sits on my desk all year. Even though electronically I look continually at the budget and expense report and I see where we're at. And every month I do an Excel table and I pull out those program areas that we just talked about, those 9 program areas. And instead of looking at all the detail, I've put in the budget for each one of those, the budgeted amount. And then in my monthly report, it gives me the total for each one of those. And I just divide them up and I put them right beside each other, and I do a plus and a minus, and I make sure that I'm always below where we're at in spending. If we're getting close, then I'm talking to the department and saying, what's going on? Do we need to amend the budget now? And I'm like everybody else. I've missed it, you guys. I think I've been noted in audits too. This area went over. We bought property in a TIF district in May one year. Well, I'm done amending the budget by April. They didn't know they were going to get it done before the end of the fiscal year. So of course we were written up because we spent more than we had budgeted in that particular year. But the budget is a tool to help you monitor your progress. How are we doing? We borrowed all this money for 4 projects and you don't even have an engineer on staff yet, and it's February. What's going on? Is this project not happening? Should we be moving the money to another project and delaying your project? Questions like that you'll want to ask. And then it's also a tool you can watch to monitor and safeguard some of your city resources. So if you start seeing, you think, oh, that's kind of weird that those revenues look lower than they should be, or they look higher than they should be. Are we accounting for something wrong? I was just in a community on Friday, and I said, this looks like a really high revenue number in your liquor license line item. I said, did you guys like get a really big bar or something? I mean, it was a really big number. And she said, well, that doesn't make any sense. And I said, well, let's pull up the detail. So we pull up the detail, and a month of utility revenue, however they do it in G-Works, it goes off of some other system. I can't, if you, those of you that have G-Works know what I'm talking about, you must do a journal entry into G-Works about the amount of utility revenue you got that month, and they put it on the wrong line item. Well, so utility revenues looked really low, and this particular alcohol license is like, holy moly, that's a lot. So that's your monitoring. And then the other monitoring is, oh wow, boy, you sure collecting very much money on your library fines this year, and your department director saying, yeah, I thought that was kind of weird, and you finding out that someone was taking all that cash home and not putting it in the bank. So those are the monitoring and the safeguarding things that you can do as the finance director. And then, of course, when we talk about state and federal compliances, the easiest one to talk about right now, of course, is ARPA, because we know that that compliance deadline is starting to loom over us. And April of 24 is when we have to be definitely committed. And I know that the league did a webinar on that. Bill Goodley, I always say his last name wrong, my apologies, is a consultant that helps you with all your federal grants and those types of things. Can help you make sure you've got it covered so that you don't lose that money back to the feds. If you need help getting his contact information, I'll gladly give it to you. But then in addition to having it committed for, strongly committed, whatever it is that you need to do, you obviously have to have it spent by December of 26. So things like that that you're monitoring and you make sure that you're doing to stay on top of things is very important. So the budget adoption then, as we talked about, in Iowa, it is regulated by the state. We need to consider the fact that the budget is an appropriation, and it's what gives you the authorization to spend the money. And the reason for all the transparency and what we can do to get to offer up transparency is have our public work sessions, our budget public work sessions, be posted as a public meeting. Obviously, you need to follow all the publication posting and such for the hearing requirements, and then all of the social media posting guidelines that we have um, with the documents that we've been given by the state. So this is just in there as a thing to remind you of what the common revenues are that you can be getting. We talked about grants, backfill. You're still receiving a portion of the commercial and industrial backfill. And on the State Department of Management website, if you go to city resources and you go down a ways, there's a calculation tool to determine what your city is going to get for your commercial and industrial backfill amount for FY25. You need to know what your proposed property tax rates are going to be to fill out that form, but you're going to want to know what that is for your community. And on that same page, there's also a calculation tool for your business and property tax credit amount that you'll be getting. So both of those tools, again, are on the Iowa Department of Management's website. And then it says local government, and then you would go to city resources and you just scroll down and you would see those two calculation tools and you download the information. And if you have any problems with that or whatever, just let me know. And then common expenditures, we all know most of ours, of course, are salaries and benefits because we are there for service purposes. And then contracts with other businesses like maybe the garbage company or engineers or builders or that type of thing. And then supplies and materials. If you have a sewer plant or a water plant, the chemical costs are unbelievable. Service fees, our software fees are so high. And I guess that's the one that came to my mind at this point. But then we have our utilities. We all have water utilities, electric utilities, gas, telephone, internet, all of those types of utility fees. And then, of course, our major capital expenses of equipment and construction and land building and those types of things. Then, the budget, the state has imposed some limits and restrictions for us and definitely have limits for us regarding our revenue types and what we can collect money for, obviously. And then, of course, they now have created more limits regarding the actual general fund levy amount that we can collect on, and then any other like hotel motel tax, we can't go over a certain percentage. Local option sales tax has a certain percentage. Things like that we can collect those monies, but they just keep trying to take more and more of those away for us, of course. And then they continue to require certain state mandated expenditures like our IPERS 411, um, um, and if the wastewater compliance or stormwater compliance numbers, all of those types of things that they just keep bringing down on us to comply with certain mandates. So the budgets in Iowa, of course, the process has really changed this year. And we're really coming up on the deadline right now. And although they said the budgets had to be done by April 30th, the bottom line is they're pretty much having us have them done by March 5th. The law says we have till March 15th, but the state has requested most of us try to be done by March 5th. I don't think they can do anything to us if we're not done by till March 15th. But the purpose is then they are going to create this new um, uh, truth and taxation type of statement they're going to mail to every property owner. And it's going to require the cooperation of the cities, the county auditor, and the school system. And it's requiring each of those entities, including cities, to have a separate standalone public hearing on our proposed tax rate. And when we do that, it is supposed to be a separate and standalone hearing. We can't have it in conjunction with another council meeting. We can't have anything else on the agenda. And we can't have that hearing until at least March 25th, because the law says the county has to mail out that notice by March 15th. No, we have to get our stuff to them by March 15th. The county has to mail it out by March 20th. And the state has said we should at least give the mail 5 days to make sure every property owner has received that notice. And so if we did that, they're suggesting that we not have that proposed tax notice hearing before March 25th. And so you can't even set the public hearing for having your budget adopted until after you have your proposed tax hearing, which cannot be before March 25th. So they did give us till April 30th, which is what we need with all these hearings that are required, but they didn't quite explain all of that and how that was going to work. But this new code, again, was specifically directed to ratchet back the amount of growth the city could contain or could get. And I think if they would have, not that it matters, but I think if they would have waited until they saw what the rollback did anyway on residential properties, they would have realized that that was in place and it took care of the problem. But the levy that they've done now is going to obviously the caps exactly what we can collect. And purpose we think of this House File 718 was that all cities get back to this 810 levy if we can get at that. But the new rate, the new House File 718 that we talked about, combined a whole bunch of different levies, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And then it's going to do this ratchet back mechanism that we have on our tax rate. But all of the rates that are on this screen right now, these all used to be separate areas of the city budget that a city could levy some sort of property tax levy rate to collect property tax money on. They're now all gone, and they've all been consolidated into this CGFL rate that we have. And that rate is the main rate that we'll be using, but these were left in place. If you have publicly owned transit, they left that rate alone. If you have your own airport, that rate is alone. left alone. They did leave alone the library property and casualty self-insurance. So if you wanted to, you could levy for your general fund portion only of your property and casualty insurance. And then they left the support of the local emergency management commission, which you have to be really careful for that. That basically means if you have a countywide um, emergency management commission and they send out invoices to each of the city and the counties and they pay for that service that way, that could be deducted. But if it's some sort of 28E agreement with them, um, those aren't what they're talking about, and you would need your city attorney to weigh in on that and help you with that if that was necessary. And then they did leave unified law enforcement, which there's only a few in the state. In fact, I should just get a list of who they are that would apply to. And then, of course, they left ag alone. And then you're still able to levy your employee benefit levies and your police and fire, FICA, IPERS, other employees. There's also a capital improvement reserve levy you could use. You can't use that without an election of your community and vote by the people that says you're going to do that. And I guess to do it, you would need to have a capital improvement plan that lays out specifically all the finances for the years. And so your residents would know what that tax is going to be paying for. There are some cities out there that have that and have had it for years. If you're interested in that, there's more laws on that you'll have to read up on and get ready for an election and that type of thing. And then they left debt service levy alone. If anybody has any questions, I hope you guys will just unmute yourself and interrupt me, okay? So we talk about this ratcheting down thing, and most of you city clerks out there have probably already figured out what your ratchet back would be. But basically it had to do with your non-TIF taxable valuation, which was that line 2A on your budget form. And it was going to reduce your levy growth depending on how much you grew. And if you grew between 0 and 3, it was not going to change anything. It was just going to combine all those levies and that rate would stay the same. If you grew between 3 and 6, it ratcheted it back about 2%. If you grew between over 6%, it ratcheted it back about 3%. Ted, with the Department of Management, had completed the entire calculation into our budget form with the state. So we were able to just pull up those budget forms. And if your county had put in your valuation and you used the drop down tool and put in your city name, it calculated all of it for you. And as long as you are using the new maximum combined levy for your community. So say you were at 810 and it rolled you back to 7.89. That was the maximum combined levy your city could use. As long as you're still using that maximum combined levy amount, you're still able to use the employee benefit levies. I wasn't sure when it kept talking about the maximum amount. And so as long as you're using that, you still can. This calculation, where's my time at here? How long do we go?
Till 12:30.
Okay, so I have 10 slides left. So this slide, I did this slide for the presentations previously and a number of other presentations because I thought it was important that clerks knew how to do their own calculation and could understand it. So if you look at this slide and you, excuse me, I'm gonna try to find something here. And you have to put in numbers, you'll see that we've provided like the Excel formula off to the side. But in this particular case, we're just literally showing that a city grew about 15.095%. And when you do the calculation for the ratcheting back effect, Oh, their current tax rate was 6.341. So the ratchet back, of course, was going to be the 3% because they grew over 6%. And after we did all these calculations, which are kind of off to the side, but if you followed them through, you would see how it worked with the numbers. The rate can only be 6.15668. So last year they had 6.34138. They grew 15%. Their new rate can only be 6.15648. And their growth then can only be, instead of 15%, it's going to be 11.74%. So about 3% that they rolled them back. But on the form that Ted has done on our budget form itself, all these numbers up there, and each of you, like Lindsay, for example, if you can unmute yourself, have you been able to go in there and put your valuation in there or your city in there and see how that worked for you?
I actually had issues with getting access, so I just got the access just real recently. I have not completed everything as of yet.
But if you have you went in there?
I have.
Okay, and so when that first property tax page came up, the very top of that page should have shown you what had happened with your valuation and what your rate was and what it can be for next year. So if you need help with any of that, you reach out to me and I can help you.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
Excellent.
that's
Thank
part
you.
that's part of what I do for the league, okay? But
Okay.
anyway, um they made it very convoluted instead of just telling you take 3% times this and take it back. But we're so lucky that Ted was able to do that tool for us and get that done. But what everyone is struggling with right now, now that they're able to do that, is trying to figure out, because a lot of cities only meet once a month, and a lot of cities still have to publish if they're over 200 in population, they have to publish in a paper, and their paper might publish once a week, and they have to get certain things in by a certain day. And so finding the right dates for them to hold public hearings and to have this first public hearing done, it's been kind of hard. So I've been working with a lot of cities on trying to develop calendars for them. And they unfortunately have had to set a lot of extra public hearing dates. But like it says, the new code requires a notice showing the proposed city, county, and school property tax rates to be mailed to each taxpayer by March 20th. And so this Department of Management has requested that most of us try to get that done by March 4th and get those sent in. If you can, that'd be great to help work with your county. But the notice itself, it again, Ted has done it, and so in the system on our state website, there's an actual proposed tax notice tab, and the notice just goes on, it goes right there, and it shows all of these following items for you. And when you decide when your public hearing is, you have to click a tab that says propose or publish. And then what pops up is a screen that says, what date is your public hearing going to be? And you pick that date, and then you have to fill out where it is, the time, that type of thing. And then it finishes filling in the actual notice. And then that's what you would take to your city council to set the public hearing date. And then once the council has set the public hearing date, you would submit that notice to the Department of Management. So most people are having council meetings this week or the first part of next week setting that public hearing so that they can get it into the state by March 5th. That's why I talk about people are running out of time. So it's been kind of uh, a hurry up process, I guess. This is the notice that's going to be mailed out. And we used Ankeny as our example. And this part where it says Ankeny City Hall public hearing on proposed property tax notice, blah, 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 that would all be filled in, date, time, location, internet details. You have to put on the notice where your website is. This notice has to be placed on your website and it's kept there forever. Okay. And then you need to place it on your other social media sites if you have them, or links to it on Facebook pages or something like that if you have other city Facebook. The actual notice is going to tell them what your city's current property tax dollar amount is, which is what this right here, this current property tax, 45,066,000. Their current tax rate of 9.900. And then they're giving you an effective tax rate. And what they mean by that, but they don't explain it anywhere, is that the effective tax rate would be with the new valuation the city just got, if they collected only the same dollars that we collected this year. So if we only collected 45,066,675 again, the rate would be dropping to 9.46316. But instead, the city wants to collect 47,150,268, and they're keeping the proposed property tax rate the same at 990. Then there's this area where it says reason proposed property tax exceeds the current property tax. So you have to type in there why your city's asking for more money for next year than it had this year. Then the notice also says this is, and it has one of those for the city, it has one of those for the county, and it has one of those for the school. And it tells when their public hearings are as well. And then it puts in this chart. That's a consolidated chart. And it has the schools, county, city, and all others. And they are adding a column that says TIF tax. And they're going to be adding in there the amount of TIF increment money a city has requested. So that's really going to affect percentages over here, because normally the schools or county don't ask for TIF money. The part I don't like is that the taxes currently levied, we aren't levying those taxes. Everybody's levying them. It's just that they're diverted to the city of Johnston. So I wish they would have changed that word, but I was told that did not get changed. So I'll keep marching down that road and trying to get that changed. Then it also includes an example, a breakdown of the change in taxes to be paid in the budget year on a residential and commercial properties with an actual valuation of 100, and $100,000 home and $100,000 commercial. Well, that was not the best idea, because $100,000 residential or $100,000 commercial property gets the same rollback as a residential property. So it's going to look like we all pay the same tax. When in reality, like a business, and if a business was valued at 100,000, that would be true. If it's valued at 150,000, it'd be true. But if a business is valued at 300,000, the first 150 is rolled back by the residential rollback. Then the next 150 is rolled back 90%, which is the commercial rollback. And so it's just not clear to the resident on what's going on, but it looks like the tax bill would be the same. So this isn't going to help clear up any message that we were trying to get to the public, in my opinion. We'll see what happens. We'll see how many people show up, right? At all of our hearings. Then one of the other pieces of your budget that I think is so important, and this is where I typically would start, is the page that is your long-term debt page. And there's a tab in your state budget forms that's your long-term debt page, and you go in there and you fill out the debt you have for your city, revenue bonds, TIF bonds, geo debt, all of it. And then the total that needs to be levied by property taxes automatically goes to the front page of your tax levy page. So it's an important page that you, important piece of paper that you fill out, and you fill out correctly as you start working through your budget. Some of the reports that we talked about, which I just found out that this is not true. The Iowa DOT state financial report, which is the street financial report. I guess it no longer needs council approval. All of these are due on December 1st, okay, that I have listed here. And only the urban renewal agreement needs council approval. But your street financial report, your annual financial report, which is the AFR, you have to publicize that before December 1st. That's a requirement there. And your annual urban renewal report, you do have to have the council approve a resolution before December 1st. And then you also would be completing your certifications to the county if you wanted to collect any tax increment financing in the next fiscal year. So December 1st is a very busy cutoff date for most of us. We have another report that's due more like in the middle of August, and that is your annual outstanding debt obligation report, and that's due to the state treasurer's office. You get letters or emails on each of these reports and when they are due, but it's also helpful. I always print out, and I think it's right on the front page of the league's website. If you went to the Iowa League of Cities website, they always have a clerk calendar for the year. I always print that out and have that on my bulletin board because it has the dates of when things are due. So you can kind of be prepared by looking at that as well. It's very helpful. So that's some best practices in city finances, I think. Does your city have maybe a finance committee or a mayor and a council person and you that gets to sit down, or that could be more involved in some of the internal control issues? That's one of the biggest findings that we find in all the special audits and the exams, is that the internal control is terrible and that one person is doing it all and no one else has any ownership or buy-in. I think you should always have two people signing the checks, your mayor and you yourself, or and for sure, if you have a check that's going to you as a reimbursement, you really should have somebody else, him or her signing it. You should have the mayor, one of the councilmen signing off on invoices. I mean, you just need to make sure you're covering yourself and that everything that you're doing, quite frankly, someone else knows you're doing it, so that, like in my case, even though we do a resolution that transfer about all the transfers, internally we can transfer cash between our investments and the bank without council approval. We're just moving cash, right? I always print out a transaction sheet of what that is, what I did, and the city administrator signs it because I want somebody to know that I did that. I want somebody to know that I was in there moving money. And then every month, at the end of the month, we do a whole transaction audit report, which shows every journal entry that was made that month, and the city manager signs off on that. Maybe your mayor could sign off on that, so he knows, or someone else can say they know about what's going on. Then, of course, I think you should have some policies in writing. It doesn't matter what size your city is. You know, I've said this a million times. It doesn't matter what size your city is. You guys are all doing the same reports I'm doing. My numbers might be bigger than yours. They're all the same reports. So I think you should have policies on your cash balances and your reserves, on your investments and what you're doing with them. If you have a purchasing policy, which includes credit cards, who's authorized to use them, what happens if they use them when they're not supposed to, and then maybe a capital expenditure, capital improvement plan, CIP, we all call them. I think those are very important to take care of. I could go on and on about some of these things that I think you want should be on top of, but why don't we um, here are some links that we could that are helpful for you guys if you ever need them. And then of course my contact information. But let's open it up for questions and see who has any questions. Anybody? Just a quiet group. Did I lose them all?
No, we just had one person who had to hop off, and he did ask for the recording, which I will send out the recording after the training, after we have a chance to edit out the stuff we don't need at the beginning. But there was somebody did respond. Let's see, you had mentioned, yes, they were asking for the contact info for the ARPA that you
Okay.
mentioned early on. So
Okay.
yeah, if you can share that either in the chat or an email afterwards that I could send out to everyone, that'd be great. Does anyone else have any questions? You can unmute yourselves and ask, or put it in the chat, whichever you prefer. We have a few minutes left.
Yeah, let me put in the chat his information.
Okay.
We can figure out how to get there from here.
I know I had trouble getting to it early on.
I guess it's Goldie, Bill Goldie.
Okay. All right. There it is.
Hmm.
All right. Well, there's Bill's contact information. If there are no other questions, I guess that will conclude the presentation. Teresa, thank you so much. We really
Yeah, I
appreciate
hope
it.
it was helpful. I know I sometimes feel like I'm just preaching at you guys. I don't want to do that. So if you think of a question afterwards and just want to ask me privately, please email me and I'll help you as much as I can.
Yes, and please do take advantage of Teresa's expertise if you have questions or need help with any of this. That's like she said, that is what the league hired her for, and she is always willing to help. We appreciate you doing these trainings, Teresa. I think this one will be posted on our website as well. So I think that'll probably get a lot of views. All right. Okay. Everyone's saying thank you. Well, thanks, Teresa.